So I want to show you how to make dill pickles in 3 different ways. These are all lacto-fermented methods. And the first thing I want to do is show you what to do with the cucumber. So wash your cucumbers. Make sure they're dry, because if you have chlorinated water, you don't want chlorinated water in this mixture, because I don't think it'll throw it off terribly, but you know, you might as well give it the best start possible. So make sure they're a dry cucumber. And then what you want to do is you want to cut off what they call the flower end of the cucumber. And if you're not sure which it is, then just cut off both, which is what I do. And because sometimes it's hard to tell, like this one, which is the right end. I don't know. So we're just going to cut off both. And then if you want a crunchier pickle, it's better if they're left whole. However, that may not be convenient for you, because maybe you just want to grab pickles and go and you don't want to pull out a whole pickle. So you can cut them into quarters and do it this way. However, when you do that, you run the risk of it being a softer pickle as a result. And you know, you don't want them to become, you know, flaccid, because nobody wants a flaccid pickle. I prefer to leave it whole myself personally, and that's what we're going to do, except for one of the types I'll do it this way since I have them cut up. Okay, so I'm going to take 3 jars, and I'm going to add my whole pickles to 2 of them. You want to try and stand them up to get as many pickles in as possible. And put them in nice and tight. Don't be afraid to wedge them in there. And the same goes with the cut pickles. Okay, so there's our 3 jars. So the first one, what we're going to do is make a traditional brine. So for each one of these, we're going to use spring water for the brine, because again, we don't want the chlorine. And I'm using sea salt. A lot of recipes recommend pickling salt, but it doesn't really matter. It's just that if you are looking at a recipe and it's calling for pickling salt, you need a lot less sea salt than you need pickling salt, because pickling salt is big chunks. Okay, so I'm going to put in, I've got 2 cups of water here, and I'm going to put in a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons of sea salt, and I'm just going to mix it up. So this is making it a traditional brine. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pour that into jar number 1 and cover the pickles. Then for jar number 2, we're going to use sea salt again, but we're going to use less. We're going to put in maybe, half a teaspoon. And we're going to do the same thing for jar number 3. And this is for people who want a less salty pickle. So we're going to let that sit in there for a minute. And we're just going to give it a bit of a stir. We'll give each one of them a stir to dissolve it. And then we're going to pour in some of the water. Not going to fill it too much. And the same with this one. And then what we're going to do for 1 jar, we're going to add apple cider vinegar. So typically when you make commercial pickles, they use boiling white vinegar and they pour it on the pickles and seal it all up. And this is not a true fermented product, but doesn't mean you can't have vinegar. So I've got some apple cider vinegar here, and I'm just going to pour in a 1/4 cup. And what this is going to do is allow me to have good bacteria already in there, so I don't need as much salt. The salt's in there to slow down the fermentation process of bad bacteria, allowing the good bacteria to develop over time. This actually will ferment faster because I've put what's known as a starter in there. In this case, it's apple cider vinegar. And I'm going to do the same thing with this batch of pickles, only I'm going to use sauerkraut juice. And that's not going to throw off the taste particularly. You're probably not even going to notice the sauerkraut juice. So if you want a more just straight pickle flavor, and you don't want a sort of a vinegary flavor, they're all going to turn into acid anyway, because that's what lacto-fermentation does. But it's not as strong an acid as you get with vinegar. But if you want a little more vinegar taste to it, then use apple cider vinegar, and it's got to be pure apple cider vinegar with mother, which is the fermented apple that's present in it. And then you also want to do the same with the sauerkraut. Okay, so that is the preparation of our pickles with regard to water and salt. And now what we're going to do is flavor all 3 jars. So a lot of recipes tell you to go get the dill. I'm sure you've seen it with the big flowers on it. It's not the easiest thing to find these days. So what I'm recommending is that you use a teaspoon of dill seeds in each jar. And then you can throw in some of the dill leaf fronds that you can get at the grocery store just for extra flavor. So just throw those in there. And so I've got about a tablespoon or more of the leaves, and as I said, a teaspoon of the seeds. Okay, and then if you want a garlic one, so I'm just going to do 1 garlic, get a nice big clove. I would cut it into several pieces, maybe 3 pieces, and then just plop that in. All right, so those are our 3 types of pickles. Now, you do want to make sure that you have space between the top of the liquid and the jar, so that, because gas is going to build up in there. And you want to make sure your pickles are covered, so if you need to add a little more of the brine water, you can do that. And then we're just going to put our lids on. And we're going to put our lids on nice and tightly, because this is a anaerobic process, which means it's being done without oxygen. So you want this on nice and tight so that oxygen can't get in. And in about 2 or 3 days, the gas will build up inside and create a vacuum. So whatever oxygen is in there now will not be there. And we're going to let these ferment. So these 2 will probably be ready in 5 to 7 days. This one's going to take at least 2 weeks. And that's the difference between the 2 processes. By adding extra bacteria in now, you actually are jump-starting the process, and you'll have pickles sooner. Now, one thing I want you to do every single day while you're waiting for the gas to build up inside is do this. Because this will make sure that the pickles are covered, because they are floating a bit. And so you can just do this every single day until the gas builds up. Once the gas builds up, because you can see just little bits of the cucumber are poking out. So once you do this, you won't have to keep turning it upside down, because the gas will be built up inside and nothing's going to happen to the pickle. Okay, so I hope you found this interesting. As I said, this is a different way of making dill pickles, because we're lacto-fermenting them naturally. And give it a try. It's pretty straightforward and simple. Here's a couple of tips to keep your lacto-fermented pickles crunchy. So this is a black tea bag that I have opened up, and I'm just going to add a quarter teaspoon, about not even quite a quarter teaspoon, of the leaves to the pickles. And what this does is put tannins in there, and tannins will help keep the pickles crunchy. Another tip, and by the way, if you don't want to use black tea, that's the easiest thing to find. You could also use grape leaves, oak leaves, or horseradish leaves. Grape leaves are not that hard to find. Well, they're hard to find, but they're not that hard to find. Oak leaves I've never seen, and horseradish leaves, unless you know a farmer, I don't think you'll be finding any horseradish leaves anywhere near your horseradish, should you be able to find that in the grocery store. So I would go with the black tea. Another tip is, especially if your cucumbers are harvested later, you can just poke them a few times with a knife before you put it into the jar, and that'll allow the flavor to get into the pickle more easily. An older cucumber does have a bit of a thicker skin, and this might be problematic for getting the flavor in there, especially if you don't cut the cucumber. Okay, so that's just a couple of tips for you to use to keep your pickles crunchy. Okay, so we are at day 5 for our pickles that we made with the apple cider vinegar. And remember, we made 2 with a starter. We made the ones with the apple cider vinegar, and we also made one with some sauerkraut juice. But I just thought I'd open these up. As you can see, they now look like dill pickles. They've got that distinct color that dill pickles get. And we're just going to open this up. And there was a bit of a gas pop there. And we're going to pull a pickle out. And we're just going to see, you can see that it still has crunch to it. Okay, and so that's all there is to lacto-fermenting some dill pickles. So I hope you give it a try. Look for the little baby cucumbers at the farmer's market or at your grocery stores, and give it a try.